Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're diving into a drink that's way more than just something you sip for caffeine. It's called Yerba Mate. Maybe you've seen soccer stars carrying it around, or spotted it in Hollywood interviews, or maybe you've even tried one of those canned energy drinks at the store. But here's the thing, this leaf has a story that goes way beyond trendy cans in the US. It's ancient, it's cultural, it's been fought over, celebrated, and it still holds this almost sacred place in South America. So, let's start simple. What is it? Yerba mate comes from the leaves and stems of a plant called Ilex paraguariensis. It's a type of holly tree that only grows in this specific subtropical region, northern Argentina, Paraguay, southern Brazil, and Uruguay. Now, people often call it tea, but technically it's not tea at all. Real tea comes from the Camellia sinensis plant. Mate's different. What makes it really special is that it's one of the very few plants in the world that naturally produce caffeine. Coffee does, cacao does, cola and guarana do, and so does mate. So, yeah, it's in some pretty legendary company. Even the name tells a story. Yerba means herb in Spanish, and mate comes from the Quechua word mati, which means gourd or drinking vessel. So literally, the gourd herb. And that's exactly how people drink it traditionally. Hot water poured over the leaves in a hollowed-out gourd, sipped through a filtered metal straw called a bombilla. In Paraguay, there's a chilled version called tereré, often with cold water or fruit juice, perfect for hot weather. Fast forward to today, and you'll find mate in all sorts of forms. Tea bags, powdered extracts, capsules, and those canned, ready-to-drink energy mates that are everywhere now. Now, what about taste? Let's be honest, mate is not love at first sip for most people. It's often described as earthy, grassy, a little bitter, sometimes smoky. Some people compare it to green tea, but more robust, less astringent. Others say it's like matcha's South American cousin. But here's the fun part. That flavor doesn't just happen. It's crafted. After harvesting, often by hand by workers known as yerbateros, the leaves are roasted and dried. Sometimes that's done directly over wood smoke, which adds a very distinct smoky taste. Then the leaves are aged for anywhere from 1 month up to 2 years, which deepens and smooths out the flavor. Finally, they're milled into this very specific blend of leaf powder, fragments, and twigs. And yes, the twigs are supposed to be there. They're not filler. They actually help give the drink body and stop the straw from clogging. Now here's where things get really interesting. There are basically 2 worlds of mate drinking. On one side, the traditional ritual. A gourd, a bombilla, hot water, and a circle of friends passing it around. On the other, modern convenience. Cans, bottles, tea bags, quick, easy, individual. And that split, ritual versus convenience, pretty much defines mate's identity today. Is it about culture and community, or just about energy in a can? Depends on who's drinking. But to really understand why people care so much about this plant, we've got to go back in time. Long before Europeans set foot in South America, the Guaraní people were drinking it. To them, mate was literally a gift from the gods. It gave them strength, healed sickness, and sustained life. They called it ca, just the herb, because it was that essential. They drank it in ceremonies, used it daily, and even traded it across long distances. In fact, archaeologists found mate leaves in a 1,000-year-old tomb in Peru, way outside the plant's native range. That means it was valuable enough to move through pre-Columbian trade networks. Some groups even chewed the raw leaves for energy, or fermented them into a drink. Then the Spanish arrived in the 1500s, and at first, they didn't like mate at all. They called it a bad habit, even banned it in some cases. But that didn't last. They saw how powerful it was as a trade good and a source of energy, and suddenly they wanted in. The problem was mate was really hard to grow. For over a century, Europeans tried to cultivate it and failed. They had to rely on harvesting wild trees, which was slow and dangerous. Then came the Jesuits. In the 1600s, they cracked the secret to cultivation. The seeds of mate are super tough, and in nature, they only sprout after passing through the digestive system of birds like toucans. The Jesuits figured out how to mimic that process, and boom, they could build plantations. That changed everything. Their missions became production powerhouses, and they started outcompeting local settlers who were still going into the forest to gather wild leaves. Of course, that created major tension. Settlers accused the Jesuits of flooding the market and abusing their tax privileges. But by then, mate was already huge. By the early 1600s, it was the top export of the Guaraní territories, bigger than sugar, wine, or tobacco. When the Jesuits were expelled in 1767, everything collapsed. Their plantations fell apart, their cultivation methods were lost, and the industry went back to wild harvesting. That meant brutal conditions for indigenous and Paraguayan workers, called mensues. They were trapped in systems of debt slavery, spending months in the forest under harsh, often deadly conditions. Then, in the 1860s, Paraguay went through the devastating War of the Triple Alliance, which destroyed much of the population and economy. The country lost huge amounts of mate-producing land to Brazil and Argentina, and Brazil took over global production for decades. But culturally, mate was becoming unstoppable. In Argentina, it was the great equalizer. Everyone drank it. Slaves, landowners, Creoles, immigrants. By the early 20th century, when waves of Europeans were moving to Argentina, mate became a symbol of Argentine identity. Writers and poets celebrated it, and it was seen as something truly unifying. By the late 1800s and early 1900s, Argentina and Brazil had re-domesticated the plant, building modern plantations. Then, in the 1930s, Brazil turned its focus to coffee, leaving Argentina to dominate mate production, especially in Misiones province, the same region where the Jesuits had once farmed it centuries before. But here's the thing, mate isn't just history, it's living culture. The most iconic way people drink it is the mate circle, or ronda de mate. Imagine a group of friends sitting together, passing around one gourd and one straw. It's not just drinking, it's a ceremony. Sharing that same vessel means trust, equality, connection. The ritual is run by the cebador, the person who prepares and serves the drink, and there are rules. The cebador always drinks the first serving because it's the strongest and bitterest. Each person drinks the gourd dry, making that little slurp sound at the end. That's actually expected. You never touch or move the straw, you always hand the gourd back to the cebador, not directly to the next person. And here's the funny part. If you say thank you, that's your way of bowing out. If you want to keep drinking, you just nod and say nothing. It's this beautiful, structured rhythm that makes conversation flow naturally. In Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay, mate is the national drink. In southern Brazil, it's called chimarrón. And the numbers are wild. In some regions, people drink mate 6 times more than coffee. In Argentina, the average person consumes about 100 liters a year. In Uruguay, you'll see people walking down the street with a gourd in one hand and a thermos of hot water tucked under the other arm. The government even sets up hot water stations in public so you can refill on the go. And mate has gone global in surprising ways. In the 19th century, Syrian immigrants in Argentina adopted it and later brought it back to the Middle East. That's why it's popular today in places like Syria and Lebanon, especially among the Druze and Alawite communities. And in the modern era, celebrities have taken it worldwide. Soccer stars like Lionel Messi, Luis Suarez, Cristiano Ronaldo, and Antoine Griezmann. Even Pope Francis is a lifelong mate drinker. For athletes and celebrities, it's often framed as a wellness drink or a performance booster. But the tradition is the same leaf that started with the Guaraní people hundreds of years ago. And that's where we'll pause for today, because mate's story doesn't stop here. We've talked about the history, the culture, the rituals, and how it became a symbol of identity. But in part 2, we're going to look inside the cup. What actually happens in your body when you drink it, what the science says about its health effects, the risks, and why it's blowing up in the US market right now. Trust me, you don't want to miss it.